Forge FC is ready for their upcoming match.
Simply stunning stuff! And finally, their goal! My word, what a rocket!
Now, let's get you up to date with Anthony Urciuoli and Match Day Preview on the Forge Audio Network.
Hey, Forge fans, Anthony Urciuoli with you. It's the Forge Audio Network. And this is the Match Day Preview. Forge FC finding themselves in the midst of a 9:05 derby Friday against York United at York Lions Stadium. Kickoff time is at 7:30. Very different starts to the year for both clubs. Forge, notoriously a slow starting team, off to a pretty good start. I mean, that's good news for a team that usually comes on strong late en route to a title match. This time they're starting a little earlier. Can only mean good things for Forge FC. Very early, only 3 match into domestic play, but 5 points tied for first place in the CPL with a win, 2 draws, and Forge coming off a big win on the road against Pacific York. Different story. They're going to be at home Friday. They've been at home twice this season. So far, 2 losses. Outscored 4-1 in those 2 matches. We're going to check in with Charlie O'Connor Clarke, CanPL.ca contributor, although that almost doesn't do it justice because Charlie O'Connor Clarke does a lot. I call him the hardest working man in Canadian soccer journalism, but he found some time. He's going to join us very shortly, and we'll break down this match between York and Forge. First, though, some housekeeping. Some big news items happening in the span of just a few days. First of all, Bobby Smirniotis, head coach, no longer technical director of Forge FC. He's now head coach and sporting director of Forge FC. So Bobby playing an even bigger role for Forge FC going forward. Jelani Smith, who was the club's manager of soccer operations since 2018, since the beginning, is now the director of soccer operations. Well-deserved promotion for Jelani. And the powerhouse, Nicole Demers, who has been promoted to vice president of business operations, helping this club move forward. As if this club needed any more help. Already a phenomenal start to, I guess, it's been 5 years since this club was announced, let's say. Nicole, a big part of that transition to where we are now, and she'll be playing an even bigger role, which is good news for Forge and Forge fans. So congratulations to Nicole. Well deserved. All right, let's do this. Charlie O'Connor Clarke joining us. I am in this Forge bubble, so I don't see a ton of York, but I'm looking at the numbers because that's all I really have to go off of. And they stand out. At home, York this season, 2 matches, 2 losses, outscored 4-1 in the process. York, some big things were expected. Now it's early, of course, it's early, but what do you make of York's start to the year?
Yeah, it hasn't been ideal, that home stand at the start of the season where, they played with the CanChamp game in the middle. They played, obviously, was it Halifax? No, it was Valor. They played the first week and then Vancouver twice in a row. And it wasn't great for them. The attack was, a little lackluster. And I think you saw some kind of signs of similar problems that plagued them last year, really, with that final ball not coming. And, obviously when you have a player like Mo Babuli, it's a luxury. It's absolutely fantastic to have a player of that quality, but you can't expect him to do everything, obviously. And sometimes you just need things to start falling your way. And so for them to get a win in Ottawa on the weekend in a very difficult place to play against a team that's tough to break down is really a good start. I think there's definitely a lot more positive vibes around that club at the moment, just because they're finally on the board. They've got that goal, and sometimes that is what you need to get things going in a season. You need a road trip where things maybe go your way, and then you can come home and things are a little bit better. So there's obviously a lot of quality in that team as well.
I've heard of Mo Babuli. I recall him playing for another club at another point. And for Forge, a team that notoriously has slow starts to their year, have to be feeling pretty good about their start, especially since there's still some tinkering going on with the lineup and who kind of fits where and tough decisions. Do you feel like this is just going to be the story all year? I mean, we have to find minutes for all these players. Mm-hmm. So when we talk about tinkering, it might just be a season-long process.
I think it will be, and I think that's kind of been the plan from day one. You don't sign all of the attacking players that they have. Terran Campbell, Jordan Hamilton, Woobens Passius, all of these guys that we can mention. You don't have all of those in a squad if you don't expect to be rotating, especially at that area of the pitch a lot. And also, I think Forge, more than any other team in the league, can bring fresh legs that are actually going to make a difference on late in a game. I think that's obviously huge for them to be able to bring on essentially an entirely new front three, which they do honestly most games if they're chasing a goal or they need a little bit more energy later in a game. So I think that's the most impressive part. It's still at this point tinkering or just giving different opportunities to players. Terran Campbell got to start on the weekend. He maybe it was due for a start, and when you're a team as deep as Forge are, you need players to step up and to seize those opportunities and make themselves undroppable, right? As certain guys start to, maybe later in the season, you start seeing a little bit more consistency with that lineup, just because players play themselves into those roles. But I think early in the season, you give everybody as much opportunity as you can.
Yeah, that's fair. And it's, Kyle Becker enters the lineup last match in his first, game action in a while. And I don't know, I loved the way he played. I mean, he emptied the tank for, I think it was 71 minutes he played. It was the full Kyle Becker. I mean, he was just, regardless of where the ball was in the field, I saw number 10 in the vicinity. And, Becker, he's a guy who's motivated perhaps by the fact that there isn't, sometimes just there's these innate competitions that happen within a club. And I don't think the players are competitive about it, but it kind of happens naturally. And, Noah Jensen had the great start to the year. People weren't really talking about Kyle as much. Kyle gets on the field and you're like, oh yeah. I mean, Kyle Becker is on this club and he can still bring it. So yeah, just your thoughts on his debut.
Yeah, I thought that it was really, it was Kyle Becker being Kyle Becker. He comes back into the side and he immediately is kind of the one stringing everything together, right? He's obviously always the connection between the back and the front. He covers so much ground, and obviously he's still kind of easing his way up to full fitness, coming off a bit of a knock in preseason. So I think he's kind of on a minutes limit in this game, but he comes in and it looks like he hasn't missed a beat for him to come into what was that, Forge's fourth game of the season in all competitions, and for him to fit in very seamlessly. It's obviously impressive for a guy who, has always really been able to do that. And I think that it is probably a good thing, even for him to have a little bit more competition than he has in the past for minutes and a spot on the field, right? There's obviously never really any doubt that if Kyle Becker's healthy, he's going to start, he's going to play for Forge. But, when you have talented guys like Noah Jensen on the bench that are hungry for minutes, and that just pushes even Kyle Becker forward as well. And I think that's very healthy for a club like Forge.
Last year, Forge, Ashton Yodi Janssen, the reigning defender of the year, another Forge defender, maybe. I know it's early, but so far, I mean, Mandrakar James, I know people knew the pedigree was there and the talent was there. You never know how it's going to translate from league to league. I think it's translated pretty well so far.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we know the level that he can play at, that he's played at in his career. And he's just so steady. It must be incredible to be Tristan Henry and know that he's really going to limit the shots that you have to stop to really distance things and then shots from difficult angles that aren't high quality chances, because he just is cutting off everything. And it's really difficult to play past him. He's always in position. He's so good at winning the ball back as well. He's always winning his tackles and cutting off passing lanes. And just, I think it must be very calming to have a presence like that on the pitch, who just you pretty much always know is going to be safe. And he being next to Alex Janssen maybe gives Alex a little bit more freedom as well to maybe step up when he wants to, when he's playing out of the back, to be a little bit riskier with some of the, or ambitious with some of the balls he wants to play. So I think it is a really a nice little partnership. I think that we're starting to see form.
For Forge, we the list of rivals, it kind of goes like Calvary, Pacific, York just seems like a embedded rival, just like a natural rival because of the geography. I don't know. I don't. It doesn't feel quite like the rivalry maybe people anticipated, and a lot of that has to do with maybe York hasn't quite found themselves into some of these, positions where they're playing high stakes matches against Forge. There've been a couple, but not quite. What do you make of this rivalry and where it's at this stage in the CPL league?
Yeah, it's tough. It's tough because obviously one of those two teams has been much more successful in the league than the other, right? I mean, that doesn't help things. I mean, I think in the games themselves, they are always quite very competitive. I think York probably, I don't have the stats to hand right here, but I would think that York probably are one of the teams with a better record against Forge than most other teams. They've done quite well in some of those derbies. I remember last year, I think they took two of them. I think they won at home and they won at Tim Hortons Field in a game where Mo Babuli, again, just sort of took over in that game. That was a really kind of maybe coming out party for his arrival at that club. And yeah, I think that York do definitely get up for these games. Both teams do, especially just when there's so many guys from Ontario on both sides of the pitch. Just they're players that you've known for years since youth soccer in a lot of cases. So they're not an opponent that you really want to lose to at all. So I think there is a little bit more, but yeah, I think it's one that will continue to grow and maybe get a little bit more fierce as maybe York starts to contend a little bit more higher up the table.
Awesome. All right. Charlie O'Connor Clarke, the hardest working man in Canadian soccer journalism. He's always doing something, and you can read more of his work at CanPL.ca. Also, if you want to get out of this Forge bubble, CanPL.ca has their newsroom podcast, which is available at CanPL.ca. Here are your 3 keys to the match for Forge FC as they look for 3 points at York Lions Stadium. Key number 1 for Forge, shooting gallery. Why? Forge FC. Now, the theme so far early in the season has been Forge maybe lacking that clinical finish, that final touch. The thing is, they've been doing pretty well so far. I mean, if that's the biggest complaint, Forge is in a pretty good spot. They're tied the league lead in goals per match, 1.33 through 3 matches. Even more impressive, they're leading the league in shooting percentage. 52%, more than half of their shots are finding the back of the net, and that's with 2 posts. They are second right now, tied for first, actually, with hitting the woodwork. Both clubs tied with Pacific now to hit the woodwork twice. So that 52%, even with some misfortune in hitting the woodwork for Forge FC. So shooting gallery, keep those shots coming. It's working. There's clearly enough talent on this club that you play your percentages. If the majority of your shots are going in, there's confidence there now in your game and taking some. Maybe it's from long range. Maybe you're instead of focusing on the build and the extra pass, you're taking the shot instead. It's been working so far, and you look for that to continue because, as we spoke about earlier, 2 matches for York at home, and they've given up 4 goals. So that's kind of in line with what we've seen with Forge and their ability to find the back of the net. So that's key number 1 for Forge FC, shooting gallery. Key number 2 for Forge FC, 1v1. Now, York there's an interesting stat I pulled. Again, it's early. You never know how much stock you should put into some of these, but York is at the bottom of the league in fouls conceded. So they're fouling the least. Forge the second least. But here's why it's interesting. Leading the league in fouls conceded is Calvary with 48. York, 28. Almost half as many fouls conceded per match. Now, this is where I started thinking. If you're Forge FC, with the amount of talent you have, I see an opportunity here to start taking players one-on-one. If I'm looking at these, if I'm reading these stats as York maybe not being as aggressive and not as quick to foul, maybe you use that to your advantage if you're Forge FC. Maybe you take guys on one-on-one and you're going to get a little more space. And if a defender's not going to, go for the easy foul and he's going to let you come at him and make the first move, maybe you take it. Maybe Forge can use that to their advantage and get a little more aggressive in their attack. 1v1, key number 2 for Forge FC. Key number 3 for Forge, man the middle. York United, again early, but that's all we have to go off of. So that's what we're doing here. Cross percentage. Bottom, dead last in the league. 16.87% in successful crosses. So York, so far, has not had a lot of success attacking teams from the outside. So if you're Forge, and you have the strength down the middle like you do with defenders like Ashton Yodi-Janssen and Mandrakar James and Hoja Rapport playing midfield. And whether it's Kyle Becker, whether it's Noah Jensen, Sissoko, so strong down the middle, you protect the middle and you force York outside. They haven't had a ton of success. You don't have to worry about them being deadly on the cross or in the air. And part of that is because you have defenders like Ashton Yodi-Janssen and Mandrakar James, who can defend those crosses better than most with their size, with their height, with their experience. Force them outside. Key number 3 for Forge FC. Protect the middle, man the middle. If York's going to score goals, make them do it from the outside. You're gonna like your odds, at least to this point in the season. Those are your 3 keys for Forge FC. Friday night is the night, 7:30 p.m. Remember, it's going to be a short week. Forge back at home the following Tuesday against Atletico Ottawa. The first time those two clubs are meeting since the CPL final back in October, which, as we know, went Forge's way. This one, though, for the Canadian Championship, the quarterfinal, the winner of this match will move on to play an MLS club. So a lot at stake here. A lot to be earned here. So Forge with a short week. Shorter week, though, for Ottawa because they play Saturday. So bit of an edge for Forge, but game still needs to be played. Remember, you're going to want to keep it locked right here to the Forge Audio Network, the official home of your reigning, defending, undisputed Canadian Premier League champions, Forge FC. All right, we'll talk to you soon.
Forge FC is prepared, and now you are informed. This has been Match Day Preview with Anthony Urciuoli on the Forge Audio Network. Subscribe on Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts.